Good evening. May 3rd of 2016, and we're here for our regularly scheduled Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. We know that the meeting was officially warned because we convened at 5:15. We had interviews for an open position on the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee, and we also went into executive session to discuss potential, probable litigation, contracts, and labor relations matters. In fact, we didn't conclude the executive session, and after our public meeting, we'll be going again into executive session to finish that business. I want to welcome everybody who's watching us on TV, whether live or recorded. I want to welcome everybody who's in attendance at tonight's meeting, our members of the press, ASL interpreters, BCTV operators. The first item on the agenda tonight is to approve the minutes from April 19. I'll do the chair's remarks. To approve the minutes from April 19. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from April 19, 2016 as presented. Is there any comments or discussion from anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from April 19th as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining?
Abstained?
That carries 3-0. The next, what's that? John and Dick who are in here.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda is chair's remarks. There's 3 matters that I'm going to speak to during chair's remarks. What I want to note is that I think each one of them is particularly newsworthy, and although we don't have our own press relations arm here at the Select Board, I certainly hope that each of these 3 matters will be covered in the press. First, I want to announce we're very pleased to have been notified last Friday that the state of Vermont is awarding the town of Brattleboro a structures grant to help pay for the cost of replacing the retaining wall on Bonnievale Road in the amount of $175,000. So I think it was only at our last full meeting that we approved that application, and during town meeting we actually included significant funds from the fund balance to help do that work. It's a project that's desperately needed. It probably was weakened during Irene, that retaining wall, and it's been failing now for a couple of years. And probably this year, not only will the retaining wall be repaired, but we'll also see some paving in that area, I would expect, in conjunction with that project. I want to make a specific thanks by the town to Mark Pickering, who's the District 2 project manager, to Chris Cole, who is the Secretary of the Agency of Transportation, and to Governor Shumlin for their support in making that grant funding available to the town. It's a significant infrastructure project that needs to be satisfied and needs to be promptly repaired, and this $175,000 goes a long way to getting that project done. And so we really want to thank the state of Vermont and the Agency of Transportation and District 2 for making that funding available. So that's number 1. Number 2, also on Friday, Vermont Supreme Court issued its decision in Dimes against the town of Brattleboro. People will recall that on last year's ballot in 2015, there were a series of proposals to amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, and we convened public hearings as required by law, And after those public hearings, the select board, considering what was in the town's best interests, prepared and distributed an information sheet that provided some factual information about those proposed charter revisions. Ultimately, at the election in March of 2015, the proposed charter amendments were defeated. Some people who had sponsored those charter amendments then sued the town of Brattleboro in Vermont Superior Court Civil Division. That case was pending up there in Newfane. Our town attorney sought dismissal of that suit based upon the fact that the information sheet we had distributed was properly within the select board's authority, and based upon the fact that the town and the select board did nothing to interfere with the balloting process. The Superior Court Civil Division granted the town's motion and dismissed that lawsuit, finding that the select board had acted properly. That was appealed to Vermont Supreme Court, and Vermont Supreme Court ruled this past Friday that the town and the select board acted properly in distributing information about the proposed charter amendments, and that the select board did nothing to interfere with those elections. It was a decision by Supreme Court that recognizes the inherent and the implied authority of the select board to take steps that it considers to be in the best interests of the town, that are related to the select board's authority in other areas. It's a strong decision about select board's responsibilities and authority, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. It did make it into the front page of the Reformer today, but I wanted to make sure to announce that in public as well. I also want to follow up on one issue that didn't make its way into the press after the meeting 2 weeks ago, but I want to be clear to follow up about this issue. There's been some ongoing discussion about recycling here in the town of Brattleboro, particularly in light of a decision by the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District no longer to recycle plastics numbers 3 through 7. At the meeting 2 weeks ago, I noted on behalf of Select Board that our contract with our waste hauler, T, still provides and allows for residential customers, that being people whose garbage is picked up by the waste hauler employed by the town of Brattleboro, to send plastics number 1 through 7 in the recycling. And our recycling program continues as it did before the Solid Waste Management District's announcement. So residents can continue to put 1 through 7 plastics in the recycling. What's changed is that in the past, the Solid Waste Management District was trying to sell those to send them off for recycling. It is our understanding that now the Solid Waste Management District is just throwing them away. So any resident of the town who's got their garbage picked up through municipal trash collection, who puts their 3 through 7s in the recycling bin, should understand that when they get to the Solid Waste Management District is sorting them out and throwing them away, sending them to the landfill, and they're not going on for recycling. We wanted to make sure that that was clarified. Those are all the comments that I have right now. We do have a proclamation that's been sponsored by the Arts Committee. We'll do that under public participation after Chair's remarks, after Town Manager's comments and Select Board comments. So Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 comments, and they follow up on the announcement that you made of the structures grant for the Bonneville Road. 2 other capital improvement related items. There will be a meeting next week where several members of town staff will meet with VTrans staff and the contractor who VTrans has hired to do the Elliott Street Bridge deck replacement. project, and it's the pre-construction meeting to plan out all that each of the different parties are going to be doing in preparation for that construction, and then when it begins immediately after school ends in June. So we're again, another example of good partnership with the state. And a project we're really excited about. It's going to be a very intense summer at that spot to start immediately after school ends and hopefully get the job finished and the bridge reopened for the kids that walk to school before the school year starts in the fall. But the construction schedule at this point calls for that, and we are going to do everything that we can to help V-Trans and the contractor achieve that. And then the other matter is I just wanted to call out to anybody's attention who hasn't seen the progress that's been made on the Green Street retaining wall to go down and have a look. From the Harmony lot especially, it's an impressive sight now how far along that wall is. It's not quite finished, but it's getting very close. There's a good bit of site work that needs to go on up above, so the project is scheduled to be completed by July 1st, and we're confident that it will be completed by July 1st, but the retaining wall portion is going to be completed soon, and people should go down to the Harmony lot and have a look. Yeah,
It really is.
Thank you.
That's it. Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Next matter on the agenda is select board comments, committee reports. Anybody on the board have select board comments or committee reports?
We'll be talking about it later, but 15-month hiatus on the police fire committee, and we're back at it, and it's going to be good. So, but we'll be talking about that later.
Anybody else? All right, so the next item on the agenda is under public participation. This is a good opportunity for anybody who wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda to do that. I will start by noting that we have here a proclamation that was prepared by the Town Arts Committee, and I'm prepared to read it out loud, but I see two members of the Arts Committee here, and if you want to come up to the mic and tell us what's the purpose of the proclamation, you can do that too, but you don't have to. Up to you.
I'll do it. The mic is frightening, but I'll do it anyway. Hi, I'm Angel McKinnon, and I'm on the Town Arts Committee, and I'm really, really excited to be bringing this proclamation to you all to be read to the town in support of this really wonderful event that is being put on by the Arts Council of Windham County, and lots of volunteers and partners and sponsors, and it's going to be a really great time this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, May 6th, 7th, and 8th. So many different local artists and talents will be represented and having lots of fun, dancing, music, visual arts, tiny book caravan, chalk art, theater, circus, and the list goes on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll read, I'll note that we've already signed, so we're ready to hand this off. This is the Arts Extravaganza Brattleboro, a proclamation by the Brattleboro Selectboard, whereas spring is a time to awaken in celebration of fresh growth, new beginnings, and the colorful nature of our talented community. And whereas Brattleboro serves as creative and artistic hub for Windham County and as a town where creativity grows and inspiration abounds. And whereas the Arts Council of Windham County has organized a special weekend full of diverse events showcasing Windham County's vibrant artistic culture, featuring music, dance, theater, film, photography, community art, crafts, and more displays of what inspires people to live here creatively. And whereas the town of Brattleboro acknowledges its appreciation to the artists and craftspeople who have enriched the lives and inspired the imaginations of people throughout the region. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Brattleboro Select Board does hereby proclaim the weekend of May 6, 7, and 8 of 2016 as Arts Extravaganza Brattleboro. And that's signed by all members of the Brattleboro Select Board. Thank you. Jan will probably make a copy before you walked away with that. I think we have a copy. We have a copy of this signed.
Let me just make a copy of the signed one for you.
You give me the 20 check?
All right, thanks. And thanks for participating in that. Angela, right?
Angel.
Angel and Adam. Thank you. Anybody else wanted to speak under public participation? All right then. Well, the next matter on the agenda is liquor commissioners. The first matter is special event permit for Whetstone Ciderworks LLC.
Don't we have to go into?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I move that
We're
we,
ready for a motion to convene as liquor commissioners.
I moved.
We have a motion to convene as liquor commissioners. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Now,
got a birthday?
Whetstone Ciderworks LLC special event permit.
This is an event that would be held this coming Saturday, May 7th, 5 to 7:30 p.m. At the Hooker Dunham Theater. It's in conjunction with a book launching. It has met all the requirements of the town and been reviewed by the police department and the fire department as usual, and staff recommends that you approve the request for special event permit for the Whetstone Ciderworks.
Does anybody on the board have any questions about this special event permit? I will note that we are looking at special event permit streamlined procedures, hopefully to be adopted any second. Anybody who's in attendance want to speak to this special event permit request? I guess we're ready for motion, please.
I move we approve the special event permit for Whetstone Ciderworks LLC for the hometown book launch with Jody Poloni at the Hooker Dunham Building on Saturday, May 7th, from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
We have a motion to approve the Ciderworks LLC special event permit. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next matter on the Liquor Commissioner's agenda is to consider new procedures for permits for alcohol-related events. Peter, do you want to start, or should we ask town clerk?
So I'll begin, and Annette is here and can certainly speak to any details that you'd like her to speak to. At the Select Board's request, Annette did research on the ability of the town under state statutes to issue these permits administratively, and then also on what would be best practices to follow in handling this task administratively. The public that watches these meetings, and certainly you who have to vote on these matters, know that it's not been uncommon for us to have 2 or 3 of these per meeting. And it's been a rare meeting when we haven't had at least one over the last year. So as you were seeing so many of them come through and how they were really pretty routine matters once they've been reviewed by the public safety staff in particular, the question arose as to whether we could be more efficient in the granting of these by doing that administratively. That's not just a matter of streamlining the work and taking some items off of the agenda that really didn't require your policy review. It's also a matter of being able to be more responsive to the applicants, because there have been times when applications for the special event permits have been delayed in order to wait for the opportunity to come here to the Select Board. And we've been told, at least anecdotally, that there are times when people would have liked to have applied for one, but couldn't deal with the timeline and the lag related to the Select Board schedule. And so now we'll be able to turn those around more quickly at staff level. There's a memorandum dated April 25th in your materials for this evening's meeting that Town Clerk Annette Cappy prepared that has in it not only some information about this process and about the different types of permits that are issued, but importantly on page 2 of that memorandum, under the header Proposed Permit Application Best Practices, the sequence of events that we would follow in handling this task. And one additional final point is while the bulk of these, the vast majority, would be handled administratively going forward, we do anticipate that from time to time there might be one that staff either has significant concerns about and would recommend against a granting of a permit, or more likely just believes that it is sufficiently complex that in that particular instance it would warrant Select Board review and some discussion of the pros and cons rather than just a granting of the permit administratively. And so one of the provisions in here is that we would make that determination during our staff review, and if needed, would place an item on a select board agenda. So you still might see one from time to time, but it would be rare. I know that there's at least one member of the public who would like to speak to this evening, and Annette may have something to add to what I've summarized.
Yeah, I'd like to start by asking Annette to just talk with us a little bit about the procedure and how you came to these recommendations, if that's okay. Thanks, Annette, for coming.
Thank you. So, as Peter mentioned, the primary reason for doing this is a more efficient way of handling these for the applicant. In fact, the application that you just approved, the one before this, that falls into that category. They had applied, I believe it was April 22nd. This is the first meeting they were able to be heard at, and the event is Saturday. So what this does is decrease the time between your meeting and the application getting to DLC. DLC requires 5 days notice for a special event. We're not going to have 5 days. So what this involved was the applicant contacting DLC in advance, asking if they would forego the 5-day lead time and accept a smaller, and they said they would. So they're waiting for me to sign this and send it up to them tomorrow. What I also found out on Friday with a meeting with Cassandra Holloway at BC Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition and the investigator was that the smaller, the least amount of time that DLC has them, the more they go uninvestigated. Because when DLC gets them in such short notice, they don't have time to do the processing and get the application to the local investigator in a timely manner, so that many of these go uninvestigated. That doesn't mean that they will investigate every single one, but their schedule is already booked. So the sooner DLC gets these applications, the better it is for the investigator and for the town of Brattleboro also. And I was not aware of that until this past Friday. So pretty much the outline that you see for what our best practices would be are what we are doing now. They all go before fire and police, if necessary, public works or rec department, whichever other departments it would affect. They have a say in it, and they've never been approved or sent to you without approval from all the participating departments.
And so that's an important thing to note, that anytime we get a special event permit, the application or permit application, the request has been vetted by the town clerk's office, town manager's office, police and fire, and maybe other departments as well, if they're relevant, in order to make sure there's no outstanding
Make sure
taxes or debts owed by the vendor to the town, and then to make sure that the fire and safety, public safety related issues are addressed so that we can deal with the permit with confidence that public safety being protected. And this would continue, just we wouldn't have to be in the middle unless the permit reaches a certain critical mass. Fair to say?
Yes. And I would like to add that in all of the permits that we have been handling, I have had excellent response from fire and police and any other departments. They're very prompt in getting back to me, and if there are any objections or restrictions, they don't hesitate to let me know, and they're built into the permits. So they've always been very responsive.
So I have a, go ahead.
Oh, no, I
No,
just go for it.
all
I just
right.
have a question, but you.
Please, no, you go next.
Well, when we talk about complex, are we talking about when the Stroll has their thing at the River Garden and there are 10 vendors? I mean, when do those, that's
When
what
does it
sort of
reach
my.
critical mass?
Annette and Peter, in putting this together, wanted, at least in the first instance, to just, I think, leave that to their discretion. The one issue I had upon reading these materials was to say, maybe we should set a certain threshold
Size or-
above which we always want to see the festival permit. And I was thinking that if there's going to be more than 4 vendors, so if there's 5 or more vendors, that the permits should come to the select board for review and approval. It requires more advanced planning by the event organizer. And so we should have time in advance. It raises more fire and safety potential issues. And I was going to suggest 5 vendors, but that's really something where I wanted to ask Peters and Ned's input.
Because the majority
But I had the
of them
same
are singles,
question.
aren't they? The majority of the permits that come in are for a single vendor doing a single event.
Many of them are.
More than likely.
Yeah, the strolling seems to be increasing in the number that they have for different events. Often they're single, but when the strolling, they like 6 or 8. That's usually the number that they find manageable.
But normally we get Hermit Thrush or Whetstone or,
Right.
you know, and they're single events. They're single, right. I think that's a good number.
Yeah.
Anything over 4.
Okay.
So if there's,
Does that,
is that something that everybody be comfortable with? Right, and that way, go ahead, Annette.
Those that we have had that are over 4, we're not talking about festival permits. We're talking mainly special events, where often it's just sampling, and they're being controlled by strolling. They have their occupancy limits. They do it all the time. It's pretty routine. They're about the only one that I can think of that will have 6 to 8 vendors
Beer
there.
Fest too.
Well, that's under a festival permit. That would probably go to you all the time anyhow.
Okay.
I think basically we're talking about special events.
Dick?
Well, DBA just did their first event this February, the Love Crawl, I think. And I think they had 7 or 8, which would fall under the
Right.
purview of this change. Do we really think that number, I mean, given the 2 events that we have, that they still couldn't be handled administratively? I mean, there's certainly DBA, that was a first start for them to do something, but the stroll, there's a history there. I mean, if it was, I don't know, what number would be arbitrary here? These are certainly organizations that we're aware of, and usually, so I'm not so sure that number is maybe it should be higher.
well, how about if we just leave it up to the discretion of Annette and that they say, yeah, this one looks like it really should come to, instead of setting a number.
I think we have to set a number, because I feel
Really?
bad leaving it to the discretion of them, and if they do something we don't like it, I mean, I just sort of, you know what I mean? I don't know. I feel
I
like,
still think it happens that often, so I don't know if it's.
I mean, the flip side is that people get to come here and talk about their
Right.
event.
Right.
I mean, so it is publicity for
the event.
the event. I feel strongly both ways.
Do you have a position, Dick?
I think the 4 is arbitrary, but I think we do need to have a number, and I think that's probably as good a number as any. I don't know how to decide this. I think my primary concern, and you relieved it, is that the Prevention Coalition thinks it's a good idea, and they're the people that we typically hear from, and the people that know more about it than we do. So I think 4 is fine. We'll see if it causes a problem. We can always change it.
Is there any more comment about any of that from the board?
And we're going to do the fee thing separately.
Well, that was what I was going to ask
It's
about
2.
next, but it's a separate issue, so we'll deal with the fee issue separately. So, is there anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak about anything relating to the administrative best practices for issuing alcohol-related event permits, including the issue whether there should be a certain number of vendors together that automatically triggers select board review, recognizing we're going to talk about fees for permits as a separate agenda item. Yes, sir. So that mic doesn't amplify for the room, but it's the only way it'll be heard on TV. So please tell us your name. Well, no, we can hear you from anywhere in the room, but this way.
Hi, I'm Christian Stromberg. I'm owner and founder of Saxton's River Distillery in Brattleboro. Regarding the streamlining of the special events permits, I'm all for it. I have missed out on events that I was invited to late, and based on the select board meeting schedule, they got it late and they rejected it late. They were, I guess, sometimes it can be rather hard rule on. It used to be 15 days and they shortened to 5 because it was getting to the point where you'd have to have something planned months in advance in order to make sure you actually hit it. But I'm glad Whetstone is going to get theirs approved, because I immediately thought, like, it's this weekend and you're talking about it now. So that's great, and anything to improve it. On the overall scale of it, 4 versus 5, personally, I would, if it's a bigger event, I don't mind, that there's some oversight, and I'd like to know that there is. I mean, we're all trying to do the right thing. I'm not trying to have some sort of like loose, wild event. That it's all above board, everybody knows about it, there's no surprises on the town police department, if it isn't Brattleboro, some other town, aren't going to show up because they weren't aware of it and are rather upset about it, so it's absolutely fine. Just streamlining it would be great, because you get invited to stuff late, or somebody backed out and now is there an opening, because generally that's the case. There are a certain set of number of slots available for an alcohol vendor, and somebody couldn't do it. Hey, can you come? And you're like, well, we can't. And Brattleboro was the one hardest town I had to deal with. Everywhere else, it was an administrative task, and it would just go generally to the town clerk or the town manager, look it over, all's good. And especially these events aren't new. It's one thing if all of a sudden we're going to have a massive new event, and okay, people probably should, but this has been going on years, so this is great, and thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to the administrative best practices? James.
I agree with them.
Thank you, James.
Man of few words.
Anybody else? We're ready for a motion then, please.
I move to approve the town clerk's administrative best practices for issuing requests to cater permits, special event permits, festival permits, educational sampling event permits, and art gallery, bookstore, library, or museum permits, including authorizing the town clerk to issue such permits as set forth in the memorandum dated April 25th, 2016, from town clerk Annette Kaplan.
And if I could add the friendly amendment to say, as amended, to require select board review when 5 vendors or more will be participating in the event. And I have that language here.
Thank you.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have the motion to approve the administrative best practices as presented with that amendment. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Everybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. So then, along with this proposal is a proposal to have $15 fees for request to cater permits, special event permits, and art gallery permits, and $50 fees for festival permits and education sampling permits. So Peter, if you could speak to that, and then Annette as well.
We learned during Annette's research that local fees are allowed. Up until now, all the fees that we've collected as part of this process have always gone passed through to the L.L.C. And so based on the fact that there is an administrative responsibility and some time that is invested in each one of these and the review by the various departments, and based on our ongoing desire to find, take advantage of the very limited sources of non-tax revenue that are available to us as a Vermont municipality, this seemed like a responsible thing for us to do, is to start collecting fees related to these applications. We did balance in the consideration there, wanting to address both of those things that I just said, but not be overly aggressive in the establishment of the fees. We thought it was important that they be nominal fees, that these are not intended to actually cover the town's costs. And we were mindful that particularly in the case of the special event permit, which is the one that we issue the most often, that the fee that's charged by the DLC is only $35. And so whatever fee the town would charge would have to be, substantially below that. And there's no magic to the 15, but we thought 15 was a fair number. And so that's what's recommended before you today.
Thank you. Annette, did you want to add anything?
Well, there is considerable administrative time between my department, fire department, police department, and any other departments, town managers, to put it on the agenda and whatever, and doesn't seem unfair to charge a local fee since the state already is receiving a fee. And there are other towns, I don't know all of them, but I do know that the town of Williston does charge a fee.
Anybody on the board have any questions about the fee question?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, yeah.
I was visited on Friday around 5 o'clock by the Hermit Thrush guys, who are here quite often. And they hadn't seen the memo yet, neither had I, so I couldn't answer any of their questions because I hadn't picked up my book. And they can't be here this week because they've gone to a beer convention in Philadelphia. And then I got the email from Mr. Stromberg. I'm not ready. I mean, if I had to vote on this tonight, I'm going to vote no, just because I would like to hear more from the people that get the special event permits. I know the Hermit Thrush guys really, wanted to look into this and tell us. So I wish we wouldn't vote on it tonight because I'm not sure. And I understand we want to collect fees, but I want to hear more. And I think, Mr. Stromberg made some good points in his email to us. And I haven't had a chance to talk to the Hermit Thrush guys since, they're gone. So I just, I get it that we want to make money when we can, but I'm also concerned that these people are paying fees already. Granted, they're not coming to us. And so I'm conflicted on this one. I'm not ready to either I'm not ready to vote tonight, or if I have to vote tonight, I'm going to vote no, just because I know that there are people out there that want to tell us how they feel about this, and they're not able to do so, So that's sort of where I am.
Anybody else on board, John?
Well,
I disagree
just
with
a quick note, just a quick thing, and I didn't get a chance to look at it that much either, but, on the surface, it seems like a minimal amount of money to, for a permit, but, and there are, you can't say that we're making money, we're just trying to offset. So it's not a matter of making money, it's just, there are some administrative fees, and to me, it just on its surface, and again, I'd like to hear from more people, but it just seems like a relatively small amount to pay for a permit. That's just me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, unless the people who are putting on the events are doing them for free, they're making money when they're doing this. And that's fine and all well and good. And I certainly agree that the $15 isn't going to offset our budget by any way, shape, or means. And at some point, we have to stop giving away the services that we keep providing and generate other sources of revenue. I would agree with the administration that these fees are certainly not unreasonable, and there's probably more cause that it should be a higher fee, but being that we're not in this to, make a profit, I think that this is reasonable, and I do think that we should vote on this evening, and I'm certainly going to support it if we do.
Want to say something?
Just that whenever we process a grant, I always ask if there's an administrative fee. Do we get paid for administering it? And we generally do. And it's, if we give out 40 of these permits at $15 a piece, we could fix 5 feet of sidewalk.
Practically just. It's very good of you. You got that in there, David.
You're welcome.
Kind of hard to follow that, isn't it, David?
Is there anybody who wants to speak?
But again, I do kind of agree with Kate a little bit that, maybe we should hear from more people on this, but, I have no objection either way, whether we vote on it tonight or not. So,
I'm in favor, at this point, of, preliminarily in favor of adopting the permit fee. Police and fire and town clerk and town manager all do work in connection with issuance permits in order to make sure that the public interest is being properly protected when permits are being considered and issued. But I'm certainly prepared to wait to make the decision until we can hear from interested people. It came on relatively quickly for decision. We've been asking about it for a long time, but we only saw the final product on Friday, and it's totally appropriate to bring it on this way. But if there is a request for some more time, I certainly am in favor of that. So, but we've heard around the table what everybody's positions are, and it seems to make sense. So, for right now, I'm going to ask if there's anybody who's in attendance who wants to speak to the matter. I know Mrs. Stromberg wants to speak to it, so same rules apply to the mic.
Hello, I'm Christian Stromberg. I'm owner and founder of Saxton's River Distillery, which, by the way, we've now been in town for 5 years as of April.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of the things that allowed us to kind of make the move, I worked by myself in my barn in Cambridgeport, and when I started, actually, in the state of Vermont, there was no way to do any sort of tasting or promotion. I make an alcoholic beverage, and it's regulated. Physically, there was no way. I couldn't just bring a bottle in here at any time. I couldn't get a permit to bring a bottle in here for you to try. So eventually, by our own kind of lobbying efforts, we're allowed to get a special events permit. And through that permit, I was able to start going all over the state, really, and getting into different events. And some we could sell at, and some were you just taste. At that time, and things are different. It's been 10 years now, but when I started, every penny was dear, quite literally. And the permit was also $25 back then. But these are one-off events. This isn't like my manufacturer's permit, which is, by the way, $200. And that's good. It means you can, other states have, I would say, onerous permitting fees like that. So if you can't come up with $10,000, you can't get into this. And I appreciated that in Vermont, that even in the situation I was in, I was able to get into this business, and we're still here. So that being said, these permits for us aren't optional. If I want to do a promotion, wherever I go, I'm gonna have to get one. Even if it's a really minor little tasting event, and we get invited to things, so they're not all, as the permit holder, the one who's actually applying for it and paying for it, they're not always making money. We have some that we do, some of the bigger festivals, and then everything else is, you can bring it, but we've learned, don't bother. Like, if this is a fun event and people are just here to experience something, don't bring extra booze to sell. It's not, it doesn't happen. And some events, you just physically don't want people walking around with bottles of liquor after. So that's kind of what I've learned over the years. And even though, we could sell it, you're not going to sell, or you're going to bring all this stuff for a single or two bottle. So, so we're the ones paying for it, though. And we do some events just to help the people who want to have it. And you could say, well, it's just 15. Well, this went from 25, now it's 35. And this brings it up to 50. And, personally, within the town of Brattleboro, I pay a licensing fee and I pay my taxes here. And this is one of the things I want out of town, is that my permits get processed. And that I don't have to pay extra to get my permit, in this case, processed. we're getting some optimization, and what's going to happen in Brattleboro is great. It's getting more streamlined, and talking to the DLC, it's going to get better. I mean, the goal of, one time these were mailed, and now we scan them. I don't know how I'm supposed to. I mean, I pay the DLC direct, and I have an account, and they just deplete it, and I don't know how that was supposed to work within Brattleboro, that I gotta, and I'm local. I don't know when somebody's from Cambridge, Vermont, how they're supposed to get this $15 to the clerk. We can start accepting credit cards online. There's a level of complexity to this. This is the only way we're able to promote, and it's a pretty competitive business. I mean, years ago, I was one of 4. Well, now there's 18 distilleries, and obviously it gets more crowded, and thus now limiting the number of businesses that, our type of business at a particular event makes more sense. I also don't want to be at an event with 12 others, because why am I here? Now there's too much. And it's alcohol, and we're not trying to make this a rip-roaring time ourselves. We do a lot of self-regulation. I mean, the onus is on us anyway. And looking at like Love Crawl and other events, if you asked, how can we get more of these type of events? People come to town, it's fun, it's exciting, and how does an increased fee fit into that? It's one thing is I'm local, but if I get, we were just up in the Maple Fest up in St. Albans, and honestly, if they were going to charge me to go a little more, we might have said no. It's far. It was just a promo event. We weren't making a dime. Besides, I got somebody on the road. We have a car on the road. It's expensive, and it's the fact is, these permits are our only way we do it. We just can't set up somewhere. There's no other way for us to do this. And, and especially in the world of liquor, the liquor stores are the state. And you can get, if you can get in ahead of time, ability to do tastings in the store. But there are only so many stores that are worthwhile doing that. And I did one in our pharmacy in town. That's a liquor store, and needless to say, that wasn't a great tasting event. Most people weren't there having a good time. They're kind of picking up medication, and once in a while, then they'll grab a bottle if they weren't already heading to New Hampshire. So it's all of a sudden we're doing tastings in Burlington, and so things like that. And fortunately, the state doesn't charge us for those. But there's no other promotion. That's it. And so these events, we're allowed to have, like 60 or 100 of them. Some businesses they don't have a tasting room. Their only way of doing any sort of promotion is through special events permits, which can be costly enough, and it's going to get even more so if every town now is going to charge. And I'm not saying every town does. I haven't paid an extra fee yet. But it's going to start getting onerous. It's not like this isn't a one-off. I mean, these events, this is it. If you're going to be in business, you better have a lot of them. And I could say we can afford more now. I've been here 10 years. But go 10 years ago, and I don't want to say, well, I don't mind more expensive fees because I can now afford it. There's somebody who might want to get off the ground and be where I was 10 years ago. And this was, by the way, the only reason I heard about this was over the reading up on the agenda for the fire. And there are I talked to some caterers, I talked to Hermit Thrush and other people who they had no idea. And it would be nice that they have a comment, because it's going to affect a lot of caterers too. And I really can't speak for them, and they should have an opportunity. Any questions for me?
I can't tell if he's got a question for you, or is that a question for him?
Well, I guess one of the things that was said early on in the meeting is that the board has been dealing with these. There's one every 2 weeks, it seems, that the board is doing this. And so that means administratively, Annette, the police department, the fire department, the town manager's office, all are doing work on these permits. Mm-hmm. Now, this is your business, and you're a local person, but there's a lot of other, you mentioned, I think there's 18 other distillers in the state. Mm-hmm. Well, what do we have in town? Two locals now that do this? Is there more than 2 in Brattleboro? Or 3, maybe?
Well,
but the point is, we have people coming into town, and at some point, I believe it's already happened, that the cost of our time is being borne by the taxpayers, and they're not benefiting in any way, shape, or form from the tastings. And, you know, there is a cost to doing business, I believe. And there's a cost to doing business for us. And everybody wants the town to do everything for free. And I believe we're already over the falls there, that we have to stop, and all these things that people were always getting for free, I think we have to stop and take a look and say, we can't continue to do this. It's not, you know, when you're doing as many of these as we can, that's why it's going administratively, which is benefiting you. And I think that that's a great idea. I support that wholeheartedly. But I think at some point, and I think the administration was pretty considerate in not making this an exorbitant fee locally. Now, what other towns do, that's up to them. I don't have any control there. I don't have a say there. But I do have a voice and a concern here, and I believe that this fee is not outrageous to ask people who are coming into town who are benefiting from this, and we're not. And not that we're benefiting from charging you $15 on top of the $25 fee or $35 fee, whatever it is. So I appreciate hearing from you, and, you know, your concerns, but I also have a concern for what we go through, and it seems like there's a lot of, because there's a large number of these, if there wasn't a large number of these, to me, this would be a moot point. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. But it seems like a considerable amount of time is being taken up by our administration doing these permits, and I think, therefore, we should garner some sort of nominal fee for doing this work.
Can I comment on that?
Can I suggest that we just table it?
Yeah. Christian, I guess what I'll do is I will
Have me
ask
back?
you. No. You go right ahead and continue through. My preference is not to have, you know, back and
I know.
forth dialogue, but please go right ahead. I think what's going to wind up happening is that we're going to wind up giving more time so that anybody else who wants to speak to the matter can come on in, and I'll be making the motion to table this and bring it back up. But please, go right ahead.
You know, and I appreciate the fact that St. Albans didn't charge me to go up there. And ultimately, what we did, as much as a promotion, it makes the event happen. And if other companies, distilleries, wineries didn't come to Brattleboro for Love Crawl, it wouldn't have happened. And it's all about being welcoming, that, and maybe other towns will, but maybe Brattleboro will be the best place to have it because we're actually going to welcome this. And yeah, there is some oversight costs, like any other event that happens. But, you know, the cost and the problems running into town aren't because of special events permits. And I hope we have more. I mean, all these little, if there's more permits, there's more stuff happening in town. And we need lots of stuff happening in town. We need even more stuff happening in town. And maybe that is just the cost of having the fact that we're going to have activities, because ultimately there's businesses related to that happening. And there's people coming into downtown. And when we had Love Crawl, I mean, I was in a store. I didn't sell anything. But people came into a store they may never set foot in before. And same with the other stores that are other events happening in town. These are people I'd met before, but they were all over town. That's all.
I want to thank you very much for coming tonight and speaking. You spoke very well on behalf of yourself and behalf of your colleagues who are in this craft. And I want to thank you for coming. We are going to, I expect, wind up resetting it for another meeting, because I counted 3 votes to delay anyway. And if you want to come back, you know, that's great. If not, you know, it's really your call. Anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to issues relating to the proposal to establish permit fees for liquor permits? Right. I move to continue the discussion of potential administrative fees payable to the town for issuance of liquor permits to 2 weeks out, May 17, 2016. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? There's one opposed. And anybody abstaining? So that carries 4-1, and we'll be resuming the discussion on May 17. Thank you all. And Christian, if there's anybody else you know who's interested, please let them know. And, there'll be some press, I take it, between now and then, but please let everybody know.
That was a hint, by the way, to the press.
So, we're ready for, is there any other business to come in front of liquor commissioners? Hearing none, all those in favor of, I move to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
John moves. All those in favor of adjourning as liquor commissioners, please say aye. Aye. If opposed or abstaining, that carries 5-0. I'm not organized.
You're doing all right.
I'm doing all right. The next matter on the agenda is
Here we go.
unfinished business. So, we're ready for an update on the police fire facilities project to include public announcement of a proposed schedule for how these things will unfold over the coming months. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll go through the items that are set forth in the written report. I want to note also, you had talked when we first began these regular updates here at the meeting about the ongoing effort to keep the community well informed about the project as it unfolds, about the various ways in which we're going to do that. One of the things that will be part of that effort is that each time we do one of these written reports, which I have a feeling, at least for a while, is going to be at every select board meeting, that'll be posted also, not just as part of this backup notebook for each meeting, but posted separately on the part of the town's website that relates to the police and fire facilities project. So it's easy for people to keep up with us as we go along. The Police Fire Facilities Building Committee did have its reconvening meeting. Thought it was a good couple of hours that we spent together on the afternoon of the 27th. The main piece of business that was done that day is something that we're going to address here tonight as well. And so I'll get to that in a few moments regarding some site-related issues for the West Brattleboro Fire Station. Other than that, there was a lot of logistical and procedural work that was done as part of the reconvening process. The committee will meet again on Wednesday, May 11th, and will that day be looking at the site plan for the West Brattleboro Fire Station in addition to taking up other matters. The preliminary project schedule has been published, was presented to the committee and accepted by the committee. It's also part of the materials for this evening's meeting. I would stress on that it is preliminary. This is a schedule that was developed over the course literally of about a week to 10-day period. There's a lot of variables that are still not known or even knowable in terms of certain aspects of how the projects will unfold. So there will be some modifications that will be required to this schedule, but on purpose we created something that was aggressive. We rather than creating something that was a conservative schedule that had a lot of play in it, and then being likely to hit the target dates, we thought it was more responsible, especially given the long run up to this project and the expectations in the community, that we create an aggressive schedule and then just make sure everybody understands that it is that and that it is subject to change as we go along. Right now, everything is tight. So in terms of a piece of work that we think is going to take a week, we put a week in for it, and then a piece of work that we think is going to take a month, we put a month in for it, with no flexibility except for each of the different reviews at the Development Review Board. We have immediately following those presentations and the expected action of the board. First of all, for each of those thresholds, we've only put in one evening. So if there is any kind of deferral or additional review that DRB needs, then that would add a month to the schedule. But we've also put in a month into the schedule for each one of those because of the 30-day period after a DRB action when an interested party can appeal. We just want to make sure that we have waited this long to bring along projects that are very important, and given the scale and the cost of these projects, we don't think that it's prudent to undertake work at the risk of possibly having an appeal and having to stall or change out work afterwards. So we have built those 30-day appeal periods into the schedule. It calls for construction to begin by midsummer at West Brattleboro, and then by the fall at the central station, and slightly after that at the police station. Interestingly, because the renovation work up at Black Mountain Road is going to be a relatively easy project to complete for construction, one of the reasons we chose that site was because of the relatively young age of the building and the open interior of the building, making it easier to convert to the police station. So that project, the shovel in the ground, so to speak, occurs later by a few months than the Central Fire Station project, but it will be completed also about a few months earlier. The Central Fire Station is an exceedingly complicated job since it involves both an addition and a full renovation of the existing facility. And the fire department will be continuing to operate from that site throughout the period of time that it's under construction. So that presents some particular challenges. So I won't go deeper into the particulars of that unless you'd like me to, but the schedule is part of the materials for tonight's meeting and is available to anyone from the public on the town's website. Project financing, it's a quick update tonight. I expect it 2 weeks from tonight when John O'Connor is here for the monthly financial report that will also address the substance of this question with you at that time. It does not look promising to compete private bank financing against the Vermont Bond Bank and going to market with traditional municipal bonds. So we'll conclude our review of that in this next couple of weeks, and we'll bring you a recommendation on that for May 17th. It's likely to be a recommendation to continue on with the bond bank process. We are in that process now, and we've been receiving favorable response from the bond bank about our readiness to be part of their package for this summer. 62 Black Mountain Road, we're beginning the process of doing the investigative work that's required as part of the due diligence and as part of the transaction to acquire the property. We've hired the firm that's going to do the environmental review. They will be gaining access to the site soon. I believe that's happening actually this week or next week at the latest. And likewise, the design team will be going in to have a look and begin to be more specific about some of the structural issues and other issues related to the design of the conversion of the reformer building to the police station. That communication, unrelated to the transfer of ownership that's just occurred, but only because the owners were in Denver and where there's a multi-layer corporation, we had a little bit of difficulty connecting with the right people initially, but now have connected with the right people and are gaining access to the facility. We don't foresee any kind of a hiccup in terms of the schedule for completing the work required to successfully close the transaction. Closing is scheduled currently for August 10th. And we believe that we will close on or before that date. The question arose related to the visibility of the sale of the reformer back to people who are located here in our region over the last week or so. There's a lot of attention paid to that and questions that were posed to us regarding how that might affect the town's plans for 62 Black Mountain Road. The answer is that it will have no impact whatsoever on the sale of the property. The building was not sold as part of the sale of the newspaper, and our purchase and sale agreement is with the former parent company, and we've had communication with them, and there's just no reason to have any concern about that. It does raise a potential complication related to the leasing of space within the building. We had, as part of the agreement with the sellers, they had an affirmative obligation to rent 2,000 square feet or a little greater than that from the town for a minimum period of 3 years to house the reformers' offices and newsroom. The buyers of the reformer have indicated a desire to move downtown, and we don't know, in communication between the new owners of the reformer and the sellers of the building and the town, we will need to determine whether or not the space is going to be needed within the building for the reformer, or whether the seller has any other purposes for which they might want to use the area that they are supposed to be renting from the town. Another alternative that we have proposed but not yet heard a response to for the sellers to consider, and we expect to have some further communication with them about, is the potential that they, since they're located in Denver and they're divesting of Eastern United States assets, may not have any interest in having a continuing 3-year relationship with the town or the piece of real estate, that it's possible the town might simply get a reduced cost to purchase, a reduction in the price we would pay at closing, that would reflect the 3 years of rental income that the sellers would otherwise be obligated to pay. So that's an ongoing matter. We'll keep you posted as it evolves, but we certainly don't see any impediment to moving ahead on the schedule that has been proposed for design of the police station and proceeding with the project.
Before you go to West Brattleboro.
Yes, sir.
That's where you're at now?
That's where I'm headed next.
How do you like that? I want to make sure whether there's any questions or comments that anybody might have about any of those status-related issues from anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance. Dick?
If in fact that the former owner of the paper decides to pay us outright for the lease, which they're obligated to do, and then the space would be in our possession. Mm-hmm. At what point would we have a discussion about trying to find another tenant for that space, and or converting the space into something that the municipality might find a more useful use for? So there's a potential for us to double the rent that we were getting, which would go towards offsetting the project and or benefiting us in some other way for our use.
Right. I'm anticipating that would be very soon, and within the next couple of meetings. We're hoping to conclude this conversation with the seller as promptly as possible, so that we know where we stand in terms of the transaction, and then can address if it is going to be a reduced price rather than a 3-year lease. Obviously, if it's a 3-year lease, we continue on with the plan as we've been expecting. If instead it's going to be a reduced price for the town's purchase, then that's a matter that we would take up with the committee and come to the board with a staff recommendation and a committee recommendation about how to proceed. And we'd want to do that as quickly as possible, because by the end of May we're going to be into the design work for the police station. We need to have this question answered promptly.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the board? Anybody else who's in attendance have questions? I have one question. We heard earlier very good news about fund balance money that we were going to spend on one project, but that we don't have to. And I wonder whether any consideration has been or can be given to the possibility of borrowing a little bit less from the bond bank and avoiding interest costs, and spending $175,000 or $200,000 out of fund balance for some of these expenses if we got cash coming from somewhere else for some other project.
So let me address that 2 different ways. First, to say we can take a look at that and will, so that when John and I make a recommendation to you about the financing for the project, we're able to address that aspect of it as well as the source of funds. A word of caution, though, just from the hip, because I want to look at the question and give you a more reasoned answer to it, but I don't think that the good news regarding the Bonneville Road project is going to free up the kind of money that you just described, because I have a clear recollection, I just don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, that the amount of money that we asked for and then did receive from town meeting the authority to designate from fund balance for the Bonneville project was explicitly the amount of money that would be the town's share of a project that would be funded together by the town and others, or enough money for the town to proceed with a less expensive project that where we would use some of our own labor and some contracted work in order to get it done that way. And again, I don't remember the exact math, and so there may be some savings, even though we're getting this large structures grant that's going to be really helpful to us. It's not going to free up all the money, I know that, and I don't remember how much money it might free up from the funds that were previously authorized. We'll look at that, and I'll be able to give you a better answer 2 weeks from tonight.
David, I'm impressed that you want to use fund balance money. I'm impressed.
Well, we already decided we were going to spend it on something else.
I know, but
The less money we can borrow, the less interest we're paying. Dick?
Clarification for me, maybe. I was always under the assumption that when town meeting gave approval of use for funds, that is exactly what the funds had to be
Yes.
used for, and if they
Yes.
weren't going to be used for that, then they would go back into the fund balance.
Right.
So if we were going to do that, I guess we would probably have to hold a special town meeting to get reauthorization to use. I don't know, but
Yeah, that's a very good point. And again, we're talking about it as we're thinking about it here. So what I'd like to do is go and look at
What was the
that
amount? I
and
don't
at
remember
the
what the amount
dollars.
was.
And
Well, we got a $175,000 structures grant.
no, I know.
That's
But
why
what
I'm
was the
asking.
amount?
we
that you
did,
put
which
in?
is
I thought it was 280.
yeah. I really would prefer to do a report for you on it. It probably will end up just being a paragraph because I think it's going to be pretty clear that our choices are limited. But if there's a more complicated story to tell that might get us to a better answer, then we will give you a fuller report.
Just making a suggestion if we can save some money on
I'm
interest.
still impressed that he's
There we go.
guessing it.
I did this for John's benefit. Any other questions or comments about anything relating to this initial part of the report relating to police fire? Well, thanks for putting together that aggressive schedule and for providing us with that update. I'll say it every time. We want everybody to have full information about this project. Select board meetings are open, police fire facilities, building committee meetings are open, and anybody who's got any questions, we encourage you to attend and participate and ask any questions, even if you're not in attendance, because we want to make sure everybody's got the information they need about this project. So, on to the West Brattleboro thing, if there's nothing else about any other aspects of police fire.
So West Brattleboro, the West Brattleboro Association, Michael Bosworth is with us this evening, and he, as the president of the association, sent a letter to the town for consideration of several different items related to either the site plan and or the use of the new fire station to be constructed in the area around it. Each one of those requests that is set forth in the letter also has a brief summary in the memorandum that I've provided to you for this evening's review. I can take a minute and go over each one individually, or we can just talk about them collectively, or you might want to hear from Michael first before we go through them. I would just say, until I know how deep a dive you want to take it here initially, that there were certain parts of this that were clearly site plan issues and certain other parts of it that were not. And so the committee did, I thought, a good job. They intentionally and I thought effectively followed up on the way that Michael had presented this information, with some being more policy related kind of questions for the select board and others being more design related issues. They looked at this very carefully from that perspective. So the things that required some committee recommendation related to the design of the facilities, they acted upon. The things that could wait or should wait because they either weren't part of the critical path of the design decisions being made or were beyond the purview of the committee and really just policy matters for the board, the committee deferred on. And so having said that, you've got a couple of recommendations in front of you tonight. I think on 3 or 4 of these matters, we should hit at least those items individually for you to be able to consider what the committee has recommended and input we have from staff, as well as certainly from Michael.
Right. So I think probably procedurally, unless somebody on the board wants to do it differently, it'd be appropriate if Michael wants to speak to the letter and the requests that were made by the West Brattleboro Association, to let Michael speak to those issues, and then Peter can explain what the committee's position was on it, what the administration's position is on it. So, Michael, we've reviewed the letter, but tell us as much as you want and as much as you want people to hear on TV.
Sit down and do it too if you want.
Up to you.
Yeah, it won't be too long, but Michael Bosworth, the chair of the West Brattleboro Association, I want to thank you for getting us on the very first agenda of the reconvened committee. And I read also the administrative report for this meeting, so I understand the potential proposed motions that you might take up. And I really only have concern with the third one, and that has to do with looking at the existing station. And I want to just quickly read what we put in our memo from the April 22nd assessment of the current Station 2. We realized the old Station 2 is showing its age, and we realize there are some mold issues there. We would like, however, to have a chance to evaluate it regarding whether it's feasible to keep it in use. The WBA, the West Brattleboro Association, has no predetermined idea about what the building could become, though having either some kind of maker space or community space would be beneficial. A first step before going any further, however, would be to determine whether it's at all feasible. So I think the WBA, the West Brattleboro Association, understands to do something like this, we would need to, come up with a design for the use. We would need to be able to finance renovations, cover ongoing operational costs, accommodate parking needs for the existing station and the new station, accommodate site drainage for the existing station and the new station. And we realized all that is, a pretty big reach. And the renovations would cost a couple $100,000 alone. So, there may not be enough room to accommodate parking and drainage for both buildings. Maybe not. And some of us have just come to realize lately that the land is actually owned by the school department or school district, apparently, not the town. So we didn't know that complication. But we'd still like the chance to be able to take a look, or at least to discuss and see whether we want to go further with this. We next meet on May 12th, a week from this Thursday. So this would be an agenda item then. And so I've looked at the language of the proposed motion, and we don't want to hold up the construction process, and we understand that to have the construction commence, you do need a site plan. So my question is whether the motion really needs to include the wording about the first part about rejecting the West Brattleboro Association's request regarding the assessment. Could the motion instead just have the last part of the wording, direct the administrative project team to prepare a site plan which calls for the demolition of the existing station? If that were passed, obviously the station will not be demolished for a while, a year or more. So if we did come up with some kind of plan that was reasonable and we could convince people that it was reasonable and accommodated the parking and drainage, et cetera, then maybe the site plan could be amended. So, but to have the language as originally proposed for this motion to say, reject the West Brattleboro Association's request to be able to take a look at it, I think just sort of gives us nothing to work with at all. And we have brought this issue up before in select board meetings. Select board never promised us anything, but we have talked about this for off and on. We have never focused on it. The whole process has been a while, so we'd like the ability to at least have a conversation amongst ourselves and see whether we want to go further. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So Peter, maybe you could speak very broadly to all the items in the letter, but quickly, because there's a lot of stuff on the agenda.
Yep.
And then speak to the three as to which there are motions, and then specifically as to the third one where there's some concern that the West Brattleboro Association continues to have.
I'll be happy to. So very quickly, the exterior electrical outlet, there will be 3 that were already part of the design. The only question there is to make sure that at least one, if not all 3, are robust enough to meet the needs of the community events that are held at times adjacent to the building. And we're happy to do that, and the committee recommended that you approve that because it is such a low cost or no cost factor in the construction of the building, and would provide for with no negative impact on the project, would provide some amenity to the community. So we think that's an easy yes. The extension of power to the village green would have been a more difficult question, except for the fact that the design already calls for a street light in the triangular village green area, and so there will already be power provided to the site, and it was readily agreed by all parties. I'm speaking now for Michael, but he'll speak up and tell me if I misunderstood him. But it was my clear reading of the committee's intent, and I believe that Michael agreed with this, that since power is going to get to a pole that is on the green, we really don't need to deal with the question at this time of where else it might go from there. That can be separately addressed by the community and the town. And so that's not really in front of you this evening, except by way of update. The storage shed item would have been a good convenience for the West Brattleboro Association to be able to store some of its own materials on the site, but the committee and the staff are concerned that we really need to focus on the development of these projects for the purpose that the public has approved them as public safety facilities. And then as a secondary consideration, if it's appropriate to allow some community use once the public safety needs have been met, we can address those things. And so you see that run through as a theme throughout all of these different items. It's what can wait until later, all the wait until later, and we ought to keep our eyes on the goal of this effort, which is to build a fire station at that location. So that likewise is true of the next item, which is this request to have a bulletin board on the building. There was some concern among most of the members of the committee. One member voted against the motion, but most of the members thought, even though that might be a nice thing to do, we understand that the community sharing information is a good thing, that the placing that on the fire station is probably not in keeping with the intent of this being a public safety project first and foremost. And so they recommend that you reject that request. And I have to say, I left that off the administrative report. So when it comes time to actually adopt the motions, the second motion, if you just add the word "and a bulletin board" after the words "storage shed," it'll take care of that if you do agree with the recommendation you've received from the committee and from the staff. And then there's the next one, the use of the grassy area behind the station, and then the last two, the restroom access and the enhancement of the flagpole area, fit that category of things that can just be dealt with later because they don't need to be dealt with now and probably ought not to be dealt with now as part of the site plan for the building. Which leaves just the largest, most important question. I think that what Michael has asked for tonight is appropriate for the select board to do, that you could approve directing staff to prepare the site plan for the new facility, utilizing the space on which the old facility sits, whether it's for parking or drainage or some other use, that the site plan should contemplate that building will be demolished, and we go forth in that manner. And if you did that this evening, we'll stay on our critical path for the design work. 2 weeks from tonight, you'll be receiving recommendations from the Police Fire Committee regarding the actual site plan. The site plan is intended to be finished in time for that to be the major focus of work for the May 11th committee meeting. So here on May 17th, you'll be looking at that site plan and reviewing it, for yourselves, and based on the advice you will have received from the committee. You will face that evening a tougher question than you face tonight, because there is some logic, some common sense logic to the idea that the building is going to stand for the next year or so while the news station is built next to it and while the central station is built. We need to have, as part of just the phasing of the project and the logistics of the project, we need to have that building, the existing fire station in Westby, stay in place until we're nearing the very end of the entire job. However, in the planning, it's not quite as easy as saying, let's see what comes of it, because of the fact that the town will be going out with its site plan to gain an approval from the DRB and proceed with the project based on explicitly an intent to use that part of the land in a different manner. What I've heard in Michael's comments this evening, I think, does leave some room for some further consideration. So I think that we just need to let this play out to May 11th, and then have some more communication before May 17th, and then address it together again that night in a more fully informed manner. If there is a possibility that people in the community who are asking for more time to look at this question might explicitly accept the responsibility not only for what would be a very expensive renovation and a whole process of getting review and approval by the board and by the DRB, and for whatever use might ultimately be made of the building. So there's physical issues and there's use issues. It'd be a very complex set of questions. But if above and beyond all of that, which is already apparent to all of us, the interested members of the community also were to explicitly acknowledge that they would have an obligation to prepare their plans in a way that would allow the modification of the town site plan for our new fire station in a way that would allow it to function properly as a public safety facility and address the drainage and parking and all those. I mean, that's a very, very heavy lift at that point. It's beyond just several $100,000s of project and some other complicated questions for the community, but potentially getting into where that group would be bearing some cost to redo some work that we would have done as part of the construction of the facility in the first instance. I have some concern about that, but for tonight's purposes, I think it would be reasonable for you to allow that question to be a remaining question and for us to have some more communication around it.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Gerdenstein. I think it's a very, and I think I can speak for the committee a little bit, that I don't think they would have a problem with striking the rejection part of that. Knowing that, because it was enlightening for me the other night to hear that, because I was in favor of keeping the station just as a shed, but then when Rod spoke about, we've really got to be specific about the DRB and about the site plan itself, because that's what they're going to be voting on. That's a huge decision. So, and again, Michael, I think he totally is aware that the building is going to be up for a year. That can be addressed down the road. And I don't think we need to make a big mountain out of this molehill yet, because if somebody wants to address it a year and a half down the road, that's fine. If they want to bring some, but...
It might be fine.
it might be fine, but it may not be. It may that there's no way it can happen, and we need that room for the drainage, for parking, for everything. So it may be a moot point, but for right now, to keep this progress, to keep everything moving smoothly and fast, I think that this is the best way to proceed.
And if I could just add one quick thing, I agree with all of that, and so I think that it should be approved in that manner this evening. And the other thing is to be clear about the committee's recommendation to you on this question. The committee actually the motion adopted by the committee spoke to directing staff to prepare a site plan that called for the demolition. It was my language that for the consistent format of you're approving the request for this and you're rejecting the request for that, I added that introductory part of the motion this evening. So if you do approve this without that attached to it, it not only leaves us with a little bit of flexibility going forward here for at least the next 2 weeks, but it also then is rock solid on mark with the advice you received from the committee.
Anybody else on that side? Anybody else on this side? Is anybody else who's in attendance want to speak to any of these issues? I move to approve.
Dick, you do look concerned out there.
Well, I am. I'm really concerned, and although this isn't going to happen tomorrow, and it's going to happen a year and a half down the road, there's issue with we lease that space from the town school, and there's also a huge. If this moves forward, who's going to pay for the study? Who's going to pay for, is this going to be something that the West Brattleboro Association is going to pick up? I certainly don't see the taxpayers bearing the cost of this. And to keep that facility, if it was anywhere usable, we wouldn't be building a new fire station. Well, we would be rehabbing it, and the original report said we need to build a new fire station. So, my concern here is the procrastination of something that the committee has looked at, and the committee's recommendation is to take the facility down. And I agree that anything that even remotely looks like it's impeding the project at all should be set aside and dealt with and said, you know what, this was the original scope of the project to take this building down. Let's move forward with it.
And I think that's what.
To me, this is a ninth inning, 2 outs, bingo. One of these things that comes up at the last minute, and you go, okay, well, let's not take action on it. And we have a committee in place to help us, and even though we are the final arbiters, I think that the committee really put some serious thought into this and probably had a very good discussion about it. And so I think we should act on the committee's recommendation.
So just to follow up on that, the motion with the first 2 lines stricken instructs the project team to plan for the site, including the demolition of the building. So I generally like motions worded the way Peter worded it. It's kind of like on traffic safety, when you get matters that are raised, we sometimes have motions to confirm that we set them aside if we didn't move forward with action, so that the record is clear. And so I would have been in favor of this, but I think that without the rejection language, we're getting to the same place for right now. Burden's clearly on the West Brattleboro Association. If they believe that there's going to be some other use of that building, you're going to have to step to it pretty quick and pull a really big oar, because the plan is the site plan is going to go to the DRB like in 4 weeks to knock it down.
Yeah, it's quick.
Michael.
Well, it's just more clarification on that. And presumably the DRB is going to approve that with demolition, but it'd be partly a burden on us if we can come up with a really good plan, which I think is a reach. Yeah. And we could come and say, all right, we'd like to amend the site plan at some point, and still in a way that accommodates drainage, accommodates the parking. We would have to show that. But I think that would still be possible. I don't know how possible, but that would be what we would have to do. So.
Right, I understand. Yeah.
That could be a year down the road.
We'll see.
Exactly.
We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So, any more discussion on any of this? I move to approve the West Brattleboro Association's request about an exterior electrical outlet, to reject the West Brattleboro Association's request regarding a storage set and a bulletin board, and to direct the administrative project team to prepare a site plan that calls for the demolition of the existing station. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. You got all that, Jim?
I did.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Next matter on the agenda under unfinished business is to appoint a member to the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee. Once again, to refresh everybody's recollection, we initially convened this meeting at 5:15. It seems like yesterday. And we interviewed Rhonda Calhoun, Lee Leibowitz, and James Van Slaven for their request to be member of the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee. We want to thank everybody who expressed interest and came here to interview for that potential committee slot. Citizen input is just a great thing. Citizen oversight is a great thing, and we are made richer as a town by having people willing to participate at all stages of projects on which we're working. So our unique procedure is that we take nominations for members of committee, and then everybody can vote as many times as they like once in a given round. So we're looking, please, for nominations for members of the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee.
I would like to nominate Rhonda Calhoun.
We have a nomination of Rhonda Calhoun for the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee. Are there any other nominations, Mr. DeGray?
I would like nominate James Van Slaven.
Are there any other nominations? So we have two nominations. Oh, Dick.
I'd like to nominate Lee Leibowitz.
Okay, so now we have three nominations. One for Rhonda Calhoun, one for James Van Slaven, one for Lee Leibowitz. I think probably there's an opportunity for anybody to comment about those before we vote. Anybody on the board want to comment?
Thank him. I just want to thank him.
Anybody who's in attendance want to comment about this election we're going to have?
Wait till you see this process.
All those in favor of Rhonda Calhoun serving on the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee, please raise your hand. We got 5 for Rhonda Calhoun. All those in favor of James Van Slaven for Police Fire Facilities Building Committee, please raise your hand. All those in favor of, that's 4 in favor. All those in favor of Lee Leibowitz for Police Fire Facilities Building Committee, please raise your hand. That's 3 in favor. So that vote was 5 for Ms. Calhoun, 4 for Mr. Van Slaven, 3 for Mr. Leibowitz. And so your action is to elect Ms. Calhoun to the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee. We want to thank everybody for their willingness to serve. Mr. Van Slaven.
I want a recount.
He wants a recount. Thanks, James, for putting your name in. You spoke very well about the reasons you want to be on the committee, and we like seeing you here.
You still will make the meetings.
So, Ms. Calhoun's been elected to that committee. Is there any other business relating to the Police Fire Facilities Project to come in front of the meeting tonight? Next matter on the agenda is energy audits. I know that we have Ms. Dillon here to speak about her work doing the energy audits. And I guess what I'd like to do is invite Ms. Dillon to the table. And Patrick and Ms. Dillon, I guess, will speak to the energy audits. I know we also have members of the Energy Committee here. And we'd like to thank them also for being in attendance. And we'll hear from them after this report. Would you like to introduce yourselves now across the back of the room there?
Bob Reuter.
Michael Bosworth. Paul Cameron.
Excellent. So, Ms. Dillon, thanks for coming, and Patrick, tell us about the energy audit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been an awfully long time coming, as you, I'm sure, will recall.
but after a very lengthy and involved public procurement process, in August of 2015, the Select Board authorized the town to engage the services of Margaret Dillon and her business, Sustainable Energy Education Demonstration Services, for professional energy audit services of a variety of municipal facilities. These facilities span both the general fund and each of our two enterprise funds, and include facilities such as the Municipal Center, the library, the Gibson Aiken Center, the Nelson Withington Skating Rink, the Public Works Garage, the Transportation Center, the Pleasant Valley Water Treatment Facility, the retreat wells, and 8 separate freshwater pumping stations. Initially, the scope of the project was somewhat limited to energy envelope issues, which is something I'm sure Margaret can describe in better detail. But in order to take advantage of some opportunities that arose, we expanded the scope of the project to incorporate the evaluation of each of these facilities as being a candidate for a transition to wood heating. Several of the facilities have been shown to be good candidates for this, but not all of them. And again, this is something that Margaret can go into a little greater detail. Just want to say from my own perspective, not only was it really wonderful to work with Margaret on this project, but the folks from the Energy Committee and Paul Cameron, also the folks at Efficiency Vermont and Wyndham Wood Heat were all really instrumental in delivering what I think is a really quality product. The full scope of the energy audit, all 200 plus pages of it, are available on the town's website and are on the page for the Energy Committee. That's where it can be found. Included in the board packet was the executive summary that provides a general sense of the recommendations of the project. As you can see from the memo here, particularly by virtue of the generous support of several of the other project partners, in this case Wyndham Wood Heat and Efficiency Vermont, the project came in several $1,000s under budget, which is very nice. And so we've invited Margaret here this evening to talk a little bit about her experience, a little bit about her recommendations, and perhaps to give some context to the board and to the community of what she found here. Was this a lot of opportunity, a little opportunity, and maybe we could hear from you and tell us what you found.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The project officially started in September. The audits of the 8 buildings and the 8 pumping stations. I'm not sure if you have had a chance to look at the executive summary, so I don't want to be reading to you necessarily, but I'd like to go over a little bit of the summary and the context for how the buildings were assessed, and then open up to questions that you might have. The primary goal of any energy audit is to look for cost-effective energy improvements to reduce the cost of energy use. These buildings were also, though, assessed in a much more comprehensive way, looking at comfort, other issues such as moisture or other problems, maintenance issues. The recommendations also considered looking at existing or upcoming capital improvements that were needed, and tried to integrate all of this together into a sort of a comprehensive, hopefully effective planning tool. The buildings were assessed in the recommendations fell into 3 main categories. One was envelope improvements, which I'll mention more in a minute, mechanical equipment and controls, improving the systems, and then, as Patrick mentioned, the possibility of converting fuel conversion to wood heat. The envelope of a building, real quickly, because I talk about this all day sometimes, and I'm sure you don't want to sit here all night listening to this, but the envelope is of a building is considered the barrier between inside conditioned space and outside weather and climate. So the more effective the envelope in many cases, the less energy input needed to create comfort or conditioned spaces. So in commercial buildings or municipal buildings, there are other factors such as internal heat gains, and it's a little bit more complicated. It's not just an envelope issue necessarily, but in general, the more effective the foundation walls and insulation and windows and ceiling, all those components at doing their job reducing or slowing the rate of heat transfer, the less energy you have to put into a building. So envelope upgrades can be very expensive, but they're also very fundamental to determining the load, the heating load of a building and what's required to put in as energy input. The mechanical equipment also plays a great role in how much energy a building uses in terms of the efficiency of the systems, how the controls are working, and so that too was considered for every single building. And then the converting to wood pellet heat is really a fuel conversion to a less expensive fuel. One of the components in the executive summary was a analysis of cost of fuel per million BTU. It's actually on page 15 of the executive summary. And the fuel costs that were used for this report were an average of the last 4 years, included this past year. It's usually a 2 to 3 year average cost that we use for estimating fuel use, fuel cost, energy cost. We included this year that actually in the fall you had just signed a contract for oil, which was considerably less than the past few years. So we included what was the upcoming year at that time. So we used dollars and cost of energy based on this 4-year average, and based on that, for pellets and fuel oil, for example, fuel oil determined by how many BTUs per gallon or per unit, and the efficiency of a typical system, costs $26 per million BTUs for heating, whereas wood pellets cost just under $17, $16.76 per million BTUs. So at this time, as it has been for the last 10 years, no one has a crystal ball, but it's predicted that pellets will certainly continue to be increasing costs, but remain less expensive than oil. So fuel conversion in this case was both for to save on energy costs, but also because of wind and wood heats, funding assistance, the incentives available made this a good opportunity to look at that conversion. So of the 8 buildings, and Patrick listed them, each building was analyzed for the envelope, for the mechanical systems, for the controls of the system, and for the possible wood conversion. 2 areas of energy use that were considered but generally fell outside the scope of recommendations had to do with lighting, in part because there had been a lighting upgrade relatively recently for most of the buildings, 5 to 10 years, and but the other component was that Efficiency Vermont has a good program for that, and there were enough partners involved in the beginning that we decided early on that it made sense to separate that one component out. However, during the analysis of each building, lighting was considered in terms of heat gained and also energy use. The other area of recommendations that was excluded from this report, but I wanted to mention, has to do with the pumping water energy, the pumping facilities and the 2 water supply plants. Their dominant use of energy is in pumping water, and that was outside the scope of my expertise or the mechanical engineer that was involved to address that or to analyze those pumps, and yet that is something that we found we recommend that it be explored at some point. The increase in efficiency of pumps and strategies there probably be some opportunities there that we just couldn't explore. So with those 2 exclusions, lighting and pumping, the recommendations for every building included some kind of mixture between envelopes, upgrades to the envelopes, mechanical equipment and controls, and the potential for converting to wood heat. The summary, there are a lot of numbers in there, and if I tried to read them at this late, they probably wouldn't come out anyway. But the summary, if you did everything that we recommended, it would be an investment of $1.4 million which includes almost $214,000 worth of incentives available in the next year or two, with predicting energy saving measures to save $113,400 a year, yielding a 7.9% return on that investment with a net present value payback of 11.9 years. That includes converting 6 of the 8 buildings to wood pellet heating. That's the big summary. I'm not sure if you really want to go through each building and look at the recommendations. Is that something you'd like to do now, or I don't know how much detail you're up for this evening. I'm also open to questions.
What's the board's pleasure at this point? I can say I've been through this part of the report a number of times, and I know I'm going to ultimately ask that we delegate this to the administration to make some specific recommendations to us about how to proceed, but it looks to me like some of the items are likely to bring about cost savings much larger in percentage when compared to the investment, quicker. So in other words, when I look at the return on investment, the ROI line, it looks to me that there's some of these that will pay off very quickly with big cost savings relative to the amount of money we need to invest. And then there are others that would take much longer to pay off. And so, for example, the wood pellet heating at many of the facilities, except for at the water treatment plant, for example, all have return on investment that's less than 10%. It means it's going to take a long, long time to pay that off, and the investments are very big. But it looks to me that there's like $130,000 worth of proposed work here, where the return on investment is over 10% for each one of them, leaving out that one wood pellet conversion at the water treatment plant, and that means you get quick bang for the buck. Am I analyzing that correctly in terms of return for the money we spent, quick return?
Yes and no.
All right.
Yes.
I'm afraid of that.
Buildings are systems, and if I can back up a little bit, with energy audits, we've been hoodwink's the wrong word. After 8 o'clock, I lose all words, so I'm sorry.
So do we.
Okay. When energy audits, some of the first commercial energy audits I started were with lighting. And with lighting, it's relatively easy. You can count the bulbs, you can count in a commercial building how many hours those lamps are on, how much watts are going for each lamp. And it's a very simple mathematical, you turn them off, you save money, you turn them on, and you can figure out their cost savings very easily. When you're talking about the whole building, because buildings operate as systems, it's more complex. You do one thing and it affects a lot of other things. So modeling a building, and an energy model is essentially taking how much energy is put in and analyzing every single component to try to estimate where is that energy going, how is it being used. And that's also a complex, based on a lot of estimating and assumptions, and the more we made every effort to make this as comprehensive and as detailed an assessment as possible, but we still have to make assumptions, and we get conflicting stories sometimes, and anecdotal stories, and when you have an old building like this with windows that are hard to operate, and it's hot on the 3rd floor, so people open the windows and then they can't close them, and it's very hard we can come in here 7 or 8 times and get a snapshot each time and try to put a picture as best as possible. So when we suggest recommendations, the compound impact of doing all of them is typically greater than any of the individual parts. So it's not. So yes, in a way, there are lower cost investments that can yield faster savings, but at the end of the day, in a building that this town may be responsible for and owning for 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, the benefit of doing more upfront proves itself time and time again to be more cost-effective, more beneficial in the long
It's
run.
more comprehensive.
But it's more comprehensive.
You're doing everything at once.
That's why the one thing I tried to mention was that we really did consider a variety of other factors besides just dollar for dollar cost. And so the benefits are also sometimes harder to capture a dollar, but they're also there. One example might be in this building in particular, in the basement where the police do exercising, there are some moisture-related issues that can affect air quality. Addressing that is not going to save that much energy. It will save, addressing that the way I recommended here, which I think is an effective addressing, is not necessarily a high energy saving cost, but it improves that space, it reduces risk, it improves the durability of the building, it improves. So managing moisture is related in all of these buildings, and that's not always a dollar savings, but it saves and has benefits in a number of other areas, including building durability. So as a building science person, it's hard for me just to look at the dollar for dollar savings and say this is the only real way to look at this benefit. There are more comprehensive benefits, and these buildings were analyzed with that level of comprehensiveness. Does that answer the no as well as the yes part?
It answers my question, yeah. Was there a hand on that side?
Nope.
Dick?
It was actually, when I was looking at the Gibson-Aiken Center, the replacement of the gym windows, I thought there was capital money for replacing all those windows and doing it on a 3 or 4 year. And I noticed today when I was on the street, I looked up there,
Right.
a lot of the windows in the front of the building are done, but the gym windows aren't. Isn't that still an ongoing?
It is.
A little at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah, so much per year.
Exactly as you described. It's a multi-year project where we did the first year of it this year. We'll be doing the second year
Yeah.
in the next fiscal year.
Okay. And all this talk about energy, we're going to be building 2 facilities. Is the Energy Committee involved or making any recommendations to the design? And are we going to be going to pellet stoves? And it seems that the pellet stoves,
I can't be specific as to what they'll recommend or what will be designed into the projects. What I can tell you is that at the very next meeting on May 11th, the committee will be interacting with the Energy Committee and others who wish to offer to the committee input on energy efficiency.
Make or anybody else on board? Bob?
I just wanted to talk about the numbers a little bit on the return on investment question. First of all, 7 or 8% return is really pretty good. If your standard is 10%, then maybe your standards are too high. A 7% return on investment, gets you your money back in 10 or 12 years. A better number to look at in the charts than return on investment is in fact the MPV or MVP, I can't remember which it is. Because these measures, a return on investment assumes, okay, it takes this long to get our money back. But this type of investment keeps paying after you've gotten your money back. And the MVP takes into account the life of the measure, how long the particular treatment is going to last. So in some cases, you might have a return on investment of 7 or 8%, but for a $25,000 investment, once it's paid off, you're going to have another $100,000 worth of savings. The return on investment doesn't show that. So looking at that as your single criteria or your most general criteria isn't really the best way. The MPV is much more powerful because it takes into account how long that particular treatment is going to last and is going to continue saving the town money.
I guess my concern arises because there's no spare cash lying around, and we're borrowing a ton of money to build these police fire facilities, and school districts paying off still $50 million in bonding to redo the school building, and we're paying off $30 million in bonds from the wastewater treatment facility. And while these things will pay off in the long term, adding to the tax burden in the short term to finance the work is a very, very difficult uphill climb, it seems to me. And so we're going to be asking the administration to make some recommendations to us about where to invest in a way that's going to pay off appropriately without unduly burdening the taxpayers. And I don't know how else to phrase the question other than that. I mean, I like the idea, like I say, for example, of wood pellet heating potentially, but it's, $700,000 is half of the money that's in here, and it takes a long time to pay off as I see it, and we don't have that kind of money. So, I mean, I hear what you say about net present value. I just have concerns about our ability to finance that at this time. Dave?
Yeah, I think that's, when we look at a lot of numbers and a lot of money, and money coming in, money going out, and I can't think of another line, another thing that we look at where we ever talked about the return on our investment. It's always pay it out. We don't get a return on our graders. We don't get a return on our paving. We don't get a return on anything. In this case, we're going to get a return that's at least 3 times or twice what we would be paying in interest on the loan. And if we just look at that bottom line, everything for all buildings, over the 11.9, wherever the years are, over that time, we're going to get an additional $1 million of savings over the lifetime of these investments. So I think looking at it in terms of we have to raise taxes to make these investments to realize these savings. If we borrowed $1.4 million over 15 years or so, which is longer than it would actually take to pay back, to get all this paid off, we would get, according to this, $113,000 a year, which would pretty much cover the cost of that note. And so we could pay as we go on this project, and at the end of whatever period of time that is, have saved $1 million. And a lot of these things go on for many, many, many more years than that bond's going to go on for. I can't remember where it is in the part that I read. But to look at this as we're going to have to raise taxes to do this again, to do this project, is I think just the backwards way of looking at it. We're going to save money for the town if we do these projects. We are going to lower taxes over the period of the lifetime of all of these changes by doing these projects. It's the only opportunity we have to save money. There's nothing else that we can cut. We've cut everything. There's no place we can borrow money for less. We keep running up against the limits of our revenues. This is the only way that we have in our entire world to reduce taxes and save money. So to not have John put his thinking cap on and figure out how can we do this in a way that doesn't affect our tax rate over the next 10 or 11 years or however long it would take to pay off that note, I think it's just, we're not looking at it the right way. This is an incredible opportunity, and it's the only thing we've got where we can actually look at a cost savings to the taxpayers over time. And despite all the bad rap that the project that we did years and years ago we're still paying on, we're saving, even though we're paying, we're still saving money. The Honeywell project. I mean, these are investments where we actually get a return, as opposed to spend our money and pay somebody else the interest.
Dick?
Must be why you guys sitting here with your coats on in the winter.
In the summer.
One of the interesting things, I don't disagree with anything you say, but, you've all done budgets, we've all done budgets. And you see a line item that we take out of the budget. Say it's a $50,000 expenditure. Well, you would think our total budget would drop by $50,000. But it doesn't, because there's another project that takes up that $50,000. Now, it's not increasing the budget, but there's no gain to the taxpayers. And what's going to happen here, and I don't disagree, I mean, energy consumption is huge, but we don't end up saving money. we end up spending the savings in
something
other
else.
areas. And so that's part of the equation, that you're creating debt service to pay for this, and the savings, instead of going directly to the taxpayers, that line item never drops. That total budget item doesn't go down by what we're saving. We, the administration and the board says, well, we've got this other project, we've just saved $13,000 over here. But in reality, you'd say, well, your budget would be going up by $13,000. But the taxpayers never really get a true benefit from this, because we put off projects in the capital plan. We say, well, we can't afford to do this. And this sounds good and sounds great. And if we were actually going to save $1.5 million, I'd say, yeah, let's do it. But that doesn't happen. It's really, it's a shell game. And, if it was that easy, everybody would be upgrading every facility that they owned, because the benefits are so great that they'd be fools not to. But that's not how the budget process works.
Tom?
This is just quick. I agree with everything both of you have said, because it's true. But, the taxpayers will never see a decrease, because like you say, we're always finding something to spend that money on, so it's, so I can see where both, we're trying to save it, but we're gonna spend it somewhere else, and, so it's.
I'm not speaking against what
No,
he's saying.
no, and I know that.
I'm talking about the reality of the
reality,
situation.
yeah.
Okay.
And I agree with what everybody has said. And I think and please don't anyone jump all over me when I say the Honeywell thing, and this was done before I got on the select board, but I see charts, the Energy Committee gives us charts, and it always said, oh, you saved this much money, but I never relate that anywhere into the budget. Where the heck have we saved the money? Do you know what I mean? So I think it's hard to, and again, I think it's great. It would be so great to do this if we had the money, and I agree with what David said, I agree with what Dick said. But I do think it's hard when you say savings, there really isn't any money that goes into a bank account that we've saved. I think that's at least for me, that's the hard connection to make. And I think that's maybe more of it's like doing math, I can't see it. But I understand it's a great idea to try to save. But I agree with Dick, and I think it really is. I keep thinking about the Honeywell charts, and I always say, oh, we spent this, but now we're saving this, but you never see it.
And we're still freezing in this room.
Right. But it's my not getting it, kind of.
Well, it's not a matter of not getting it. The only thing that's really, that we really see that's anyway quantified when we're doing our annual budgeting is the fact that we're still paying out a ton of money for Honeywell.
Right.
And then there are incremental savings that are achieved in various places in the budget, and maybe in the long term after we stop paying off the debt. But you still got this big whole fixed expense you got to pay every year, that is like money on the tax dollar, and you can't ignore that burden on the taxpayer when deciding what work to move ahead with. I understand you can reduce it all to net present value, but
I think that the thing that's missing is that, and I'm glad we have Honeywell because it's a concrete example. We pay them, $740,000 or something every year. If we weren't paying them that, we would be paying, I don't know if you got it on top of your head, but I think that $700,000 plus another $400,000 or $500,000 on top of that for energy costs. Am I close to the numbers on that? There's not so much. It's I don't know. You don't have it in your head.
It's cash flow positive. The Honeywell project, the way it's currently financed, has resulted in lower energy costs than the cost of the bond itself.
So we're not spending money on oil that we would be spending if we hadn't done it, and we're not spending more than we're paying. So we actually, it's not a savings, it's just money that doesn't get spent. The fact that we take that money and put it into $13,000 is another 130 feet of sidewalk. We spend it on something else, or a wall comes down, or a road blows up, or a gas water main blows up. we find things to spend money on, there's no question, there's always something. But it's money that doesn't get spent, and it's money that doesn't get spent on fossil fuels that, by the way, have some other effects that we would like to avoid. So it's not, I mean, there's no question we're gonna spend it, and that $1 million that looks like it's gonna show up in tax cuts probably won't, because other things are gonna come along that we're gonna have to spend money on. But we won't be spending it on fuel. We won't be giving it to the oil companies.
So I think the audit was wonderful to do, but how we proceed from here, I think that's
I'm gonna propose a bond for the next town meeting, see if the town will let us borrow money to do it all at once.
And I may vote against it.
Well, we'll find out. I mean, we'll do we'll educate ourselves on it.
And I think this is the first step.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll hear from the Energy Committee, we'll
Right.
hear from John O'Connor and see what will work. Yeah, we couldn't do anything without this, and that's why it took so long.
Any further comments? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, please. I wanted to suggest another, what I hopefully this audit can provide as a tool is, even if you don't choose to pursue any of these energy saving measures, it does include a number of things where capital improvements that are going to be coming up soon, advice on how to proceed, and as part of the analysis. And for one example, the replacing the systems over in the library, that was included in this, a design for a new system, because it could be integrated with the analysis, but also so that it would be, so the system that was designed would be assured a greater performance at lower energy costs than if you went a normal procedure of just going out to bid, take a low bid or a low, just put it, when something breaks, sometimes then you just sort of get whoever is available to put something else in. And those avoided costs by not going down that route can actually add to the savings. And I wanted to mention particularly the windows for Gibson Aiken. That also was included because the windows, the first phase of that had been installed, and this report recorded that. They were actually installing it as I was doing as I kept doing the site visits. And the windows that were selected were it was probably a budget decision. The performance of those windows is going to be, it's not going to have the results that you could have if you had chosen a different window that would cost more. And so what I also did the analysis that if you don't convert to pellets and you still burn oil, the oil savings from selecting a better window and a better installation procedure will pay for that.
Right.
And even those windows are now already difficult to open in some cases, and they're relying on caulk on the outside. When they first were installed, I went through with the infrared and found a lot of air leakage. And the contractor was very responsive. He went back and applied more caulk. And it did reduce the air leakage. They still leak air, and it's relying on caulk. So in a few years, the air infiltration that you were just fixed is going to be back because it's relying on caulk. So in other words, the installation and how we do things, how you build the new facilities, how you repair, how you do capital improvements, will impact your energy usage.
Penny wise and pound foolish.
That's right. And if nothing else, that's why my consulting practice is called Sustainable Energy and Demonstration Services. It's trying to look at not just these energy saving measures from an audit and improvements, but every time we do something to a building, consider how we're doing it for the long-term impact. And sometimes paying a little bit more up front, you will save that premium very, very quickly.
Margaret, I think you nailed it on the head when you said this is a tool, and I think that's what we have to use it as. It's a tool. I'm a builder, so I totally get that you get what you pay for, and but sometimes, like David was saying, we have the constraints of the town to deal with, and budgets, and it's sad, but that's the reality of it. But this is a great tool, and it's a great start. So I'm happy for it. At 8:30 at night, it's hard for me. It's just, but
2 hours.
It's a good start.
Any further comments from anybody on the board? Anybody who's in attendance want to speak to anything relating to this energy audit? Michael.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'm currently the chair of the Energy Committee, but I've been on the committee less than 2 years, so I just want to recognize the fact that this push started before I was even on the committee, but it was really pushed by 4 people, I think in particular. Paul was one of them. Lester Humphreys, who was chair before me, really pushed forward and did a lot of work on it. Bob right here and Tad Montgomery, and those people helped, I think Patrick dropped the RFQ. They helped review 15 proposals that came in. It was quite a bit of work, and they gave a lot of input to Margaret as she did different drafts. So I just wanted to make sure those people are recognized for all the work that they put in. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have a motion here to ask staff to take us to the next step.
I'll make it. I move that we direct the staff to return to the select board with recommendations for implementation of projects recommended by consultant Margaret Dillon based on her energy audits of several of Brattleboro's municipal facilities.
We have a motion to ask administration to make recommendations to us about energy improvement work. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks, members of the Energy Committee, for coming as well. Next matter on the agenda is proposed amendments to the traffic calming plan. Peter?
You have in your materials this evening a memorandum from Hannah O'Connell dated April 22nd. Hannah's not feeling well, and so I'll present the item. The most important part, I think, in the interest of time, is to focus on the center of page 1 of this, where there are 4 enumerated goals of this effort. I'll say that we spent about a year working on this from the time that Locomotion was retained using a state grant, so the town didn't pay for the consultant services, but we collaborated with Locomotion. We did a lot of work intermittently throughout that year with the Traffic Safety Committee, and staff was extensively involved, both doing some work on our own and then in communication with Locomotion and its subconsultant. The 4 goals were primarily, and I would say this by way of overview, we were looking to streamline the document, but also to improve our processes, to find if there were best practices out there for how to make determinations about which improvements are better in terms of providing safety to the community and which improvements are not, even though they might give some comfort to people in a particular neighborhood. We wanted to make sure that our processes were sound, and then also to make sure that the document was as clean as possible and as clear as possible in conveying what those processes are to the public. We did do a little bit of tweaking of our procedures, but what we mostly found, we were very pleased to find this, is that the processes that the town has been using in terms of reviewing suggestions that either bubble up internally or come in from the community has been a sound process. There is good, objective, professional work that's done around that, and then prioritizing, often with the use of grants, determining, but sometimes just pure and simple based on necessity, which things are going to go in which order. We try to be very responsive to the short-term, inexpensive stuff that can be done just with the operating budget. And then, of course, it's a little harder when you have to plan for a capital improvement. But the point being that there was this dual aspect of making sure that the way we do this business is sound, and then conveying really clearly to the public how to engage with us on this, how to get a suggestion in, how to come to traffic safety, how to, what are we going to do with your suggestion once you send it to us? How will we get back with you about it? And so the 4 points are: provide a clear and objective criteria for evaluating potential street and sidewalk safety improvements, clarify the process by which the town determines if any particular street or sidewalk safety project will move forward, develop a flow chart illustrating that process. That sounds kind of bureaucratic, but that was actually one of the most important things we did. We found that no matter how crisp and clean we got the wording of this document, it still is a governmental document. It still has a procedural feel to it, and that the flow chart would be particularly helpful for the public understanding how our process works. We spent a lot of time refining that flow chart once it had been drafted. And finally, developing a title that more accurately reflects the purpose of the document. When the traffic calming plan was originally created, it was following norms that are out there in other communities to have such a document and call it a traffic calming plan. And it reflected the fact that initially the focus was on bricks and mortar traffic calming, how to slow down traffic and make the streets safer. We feel as though over the years since it was first created, the work of both the staff and the Traffic Safety Committee has morphed into a more complicated set of things that are going on, and that it's not always about traffic calming. It's sometimes about other strategies that are being employed. And so the sum total of all that is what's set forth in here. You've seen it both in its clean form, that would be the published document if you approve it tonight. You've seen it separately in here in the red line version. They had strike out and underline because there's so much that was being changed. We thought it was important for you to see actually what those changes were. And I'll speak for just a moment to the change in the title. So we spent a good long time near the end of the process looking at the title and trying to come up with words that were, not too wordy, but sufficient to describe what we think the upgraded document is intended to do and hopefully will do for the community. And after some pretty healthy debate and lots of different opinions about it, both internally, the staff, and at the Traffic Safety Committee, we arrived at the street and sidewalk safety policy. So happy to answer any questions. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about it, but staff recommends that you approve the proposed updated street and sidewalk safety policy.
Is there anybody on the board who's got any questions or comments about the administration's request to adopt the amended street and sidewalk safety policy? Is there anybody who's in attendance who's got any questions about the amended street and sidewalk safety policy? I move that we approve the amended street and sidewalk safety policy, formerly known as the traffic calming plan, as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining? That carries 4-0. Next matter on the agenda is the emergency operations plan. Looks to me like the chief and the assistant chief are still here.
They are. They're hanging in there. I'm going to speak to it quickly in the interest of time, and then if you want to take a deeper dive, they'll be happy to step up and answer questions. This is an annual process, and really the only thing of significance that's happening in this year's update is that because of the transition that's ongoing down at Vermont Yankee, what used to be a separate radiological emergency plan for the town has been slimmed down and is now an annex to this more comprehensive local emergency operations plan. Otherwise, it's simply been updated for some contact information and other minor things, and in the normal manner that you would annually approve this so that we can execute it and be in compliance with our obligation to review and adopt the plan each year. We recommend your approval.
I guess I'll ask the chief or the assistant chief if they've got anything to tell us about this emergency operations plan.
Very much the same as last year's and previous years with updates and like the town manager said, the new Yankee plan.
Thank you.
He kept it brief.
Anybody on the board have any questions or comments about the revised emergency operations plan as presented? Is there anybody in attendance who wants to speak to the new emergency operations plan? We're ready for motion.
I move to adopt the 2016 Brattleboro Emergency Operations Plan as set forth in the memorandum dated April 18th, 2016 from Fire Chief Mike Lucasi, and to authorize the town manager to sign the plan.
We have a motion to approve the new emergency operations plan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Next matter on the agenda is to consider 2 nominations. Thanks for coming, guys. To consider 2 nominations and then potentially vote on appointing new members to the ADA Advisory Committee. Do we have any nominations for the ADA Advisory Committee?
Want me to do it?
Sure, please.
I nominate, is it Andrea Evie, is that how you pronounce
I believe
it?
so.
Yep.
Andrea Evie and Grace Benison to the ADA Committee for terms ending June 30th, 2016.
We have two nominations of Andrea Evie and Grace Benison to ADA Committee, terms ending June 30, 2016. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor of appointing Andrea Evie and Grace Benison to the ADA Committee as proposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0.
Mr. Chair,
John?
can I ask a request?
Yes.
Could we put off E and F to
Could I second that request?
to another day? Because we're going to be in executive session. I mean, it'd be nice to get them done, but, you know, it's just a request.
I was going to
That's all.
ask that if you know,
You're right.
I was going to ask that we,
I yield the
I wasn't
floor.
so concerned about E as F, that we put that off for another meeting. I think it's an important,
It is.
it's important to look at, and I had more thoughts than just in these areas that I'd like to be able to explore more thoroughly. The goals, I think, are one of the most important things that we do.
From having reviewed your meeting preparation materials, does anybody have any concerns about the proposed changes to the amended rules of procedure?
No.
All right, well then, we'll call E, but we'll
Okay.
continue F.
Great.
So, thanks for making that suggestion. Because in case anybody's still watching, we still have a half hour, an hour's worth of business in executive session. And we've already been going 3.5 hours. So, we have, the next item on the agenda is approving amended 2016 rules of conduct for meetings and hearings.
I move to approve the
Wait.
I'm sorry. Oh.
Somebody's got to at least introduce the item. So,
Oh.
Peter,
Sure.
want to tell us, please, what your suggestions are?
Sure. There are 4 that are less substantive. They reflect how our actual practices have evolved over time, and so we're just updating language to be more accurate. That's the case for the requests of the town manager section, the change that's proposed there, and for the warrants. And also the procedure for consideration of select board agenda items. Then there is a change for how we notice the public about vacancies on committees that is not one of those, not to bring us up to date to a change in practice, but just for a more efficient way of doing our business in order to comply with the requirement of the charter that no vacancy be filled sooner than 10 days after it has been noticed to the public. But in order to not have to repeatedly provide those notices throughout the year, which is the current practice based on the language that's in this document that says that a vacancy shall be advertised and filled forthwith, meaning immediately. What we're proposing is that there be a quarterly publishing of anything that is vacant. It'll create a nice systematic rhythm throughout the year. It makes the administrative piece of business easier to do. It complies with the charter, and we believe that quarterly notices to the community provide plenty of notice to the public, given the relative infrequency of those vacancies and filling those positions. So those we think are straightforward and relatively easy list. There's a just slightly more complicated question at section H, which is a new section that we're proposing to have part of this document be the town's annual declaration of the newspaper of record. That is being proposed for 2 reasons. It starts with the fact that the Commons asked to be declared the newspaper of record. And so when we were looking at that question, and I talked to Town Attorney Bob Fisher about how to properly declare, what is the town's obligation regarding newspaper of record, and how would we properly declare a change if we were to make one. he made it clear to me that under the statute, we should be making an annual declaration. And it seemed reasonable to Bob and to Jan and to me that the place where we would make sure that we do that duty, honor that duty each year, should be right here in this document, since we do take a fresh look at this with each new select board year. So that's why something that has not been in here ever before, or at least not in the recent documents, now actually has its own section. I should speak also briefly to the fact that while the Commons was the inspiration for making this change, respectfully, we the staff believe that it is in the community's best interest to stay with the Reformer as the newspaper of record, because of the opportunity it presents for us to get things into the paper and out to the public quickly with the daily publication schedule. So we have a concern that, during some periods of time, a weekly publishing schedule would be just fine, but there would be occasions throughout the year when having to wait the extra time for the weekly publication of the Commons could have a negative impact on the public interest. And so our recommendation is that you, this evening, by adopting this document, declare that, once again, for this year, the Reformer would be the newspaper of record for the town.
So, kind of a clarifying question. The purpose of identifying one is so there's a place where, if we're going to be conducting business, we announce it, we warn it ahead of time.
Correct.
And so it's really, it's not so much because we want everybody to get it. We don't do it on the radio and do it in 2 or 3 papers and put it in Brattleboro and everywhere else. It's not like we're massively disseminating the information so more people can know. It's just to meet the legal obligation to present.
It's actually both and. So you're right that there are occasions when, in order to meet a legal obligation to have placed a particular notice in the proper format in a newspaper of record, we're actually buying space, and we place that in the Reformer because that's just meeting, checking the box that has to be checked to meet a requirement. With all of the kinds of things like meeting warnings and announcements of vacancies for boards and commissions, and the variety of other things where we're pushing information out into the public because we just are doing the public's business here and we want that information to get out as far and wide as it can. Those things we're sending to all the different media outlets, and we will continue to do that. So some of those may also have a newspaper of record requirement to them, but in meeting the newspaper of record requirement, we're also making sure that everybody else gets it as well. Then there are other things that are more procedural than that, where we're just placing it in the newspaper.
I was wondering if it would make sense to have it in both. But if it wouldn't be valuable to have it in both, but
Yeah, you actually have to declare one, because that's the place. By declaring a newspaper of record, that tells the public that's the place to go and look for public notices about town business.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further discussion from anybody on the board, or any comments or questions from anybody on the board about the public hearing notice? About anything relating to the rules of conduct or the public hearing notice issue? Anybody in attendance want to speak to that? Yes, sir.
If I may?
Please.
Thank you, and I'll try to be brief. I know it's late for you people. And I respect Peter's comments.
Say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Barry Oleshnik, and I am one of the founders of Vermont Independent Media in the Commons, and I'm on the board of directors of Vermont Independent Media, which is the publisher of the Commons. So I'm here to elaborate on the comments that Jeff made in his letter that's in your packet about our proposal that the Commons become a newspaper of record. And I can also address some of the questions about weekly versus daily, and possibly that would have an effect on your decision. We think we'd be honored if we were the newspaper of record, and we think it would be a good move for the town. As you know, the Commons covers the town editorially extensively, and we intend to increase that as we expand to meet the needs of the community. Vermont Independent Media, as a nonprofit on the model of NPR and VPR, we have hundreds of Brattleboro residents as members, and the Commons has thousands of readers in Brattleboro. As you know, it's widely available. There are almost 2,000 copies that are picked up every week on Main Street alone between the Common and the Co-op, and hundreds more, of course, in the spurs going up Putney Road to Exit 3 and beyond. and to exit 1 and way out to West Brattleboro to the town, and lots of places in between. So we are distributed very widely. As you know, townspeople really like us, and we're very gratified for that. We deliver not only to shops and libraries and other typical outlets, but we deliver to nursing homes and housing projects and youth centers and other sectors, other places, deliberately reaching out to unique or underserved sectors of our community. By design, we're local, and all of the years that we've been here, we'll remain so no matter what happens on the media landscape. We'll remain locally owned, locally operated, locally controlled, and responsible only to the community. We're a nonprofit, which doesn't mean that we're not running good business, but it means that all profits don't go anyplace else out except back into the business or into the community. And that we are legally bound to that, and we are, as mission-driven, dedicated to that ideal. We've been that way for 10 years, and we're going to prove that we have proven that dedication for 10 years, and we will continue. But, and this is an important point to address the town manager's concerns, it's not only the ideals of supporting a nonprofit or supporting a very valuable community resource that we propose this step from you, but it's also nuts and bolts business sense. The Commons distribution is now at 10,500 copies each week, which is literally twice as much as the Reformer. And our rates for your public notices are 25 to 50% less than the Reformer's rates. For less costs for in your budget, you'll reach twice as many readers on any given day that your notices are published. Plus, we have state-of-the-art personalized ad feedback system to make sure your ads come out right, and we pride ourselves in personal and local ad department excellence to work with you, and we're right here down the street. We'll make sure that your ad copy comes out right, and we are nimble enough that you can present ad copy right up till late in the evening of publication day, the day before publication, and it'll hit the streets before noon on that Wednesday. For these reasons, we'd be honored and privileged to be at your service in this regard, to consider the proposal. About weekly versus daily, I certainly respect that concern. For the most part, that disadvantage can be worked around with careful management, and the management and staff of the Commons is committed to working directly with your team to make this work. We have wide flexibility to make it work, including, as I said, copy able to be brought in very late, sent in very late on eve of distribution, and it's on the streets the next day. Several other select boards have had the Commons as newspaper of record, and they have renewed that commitment with the Commons, expressing complete satisfaction that everything worked like clockwork. It turns out that the Reformer has a requirement, inflexible, of 3-day lead time for their submissions of copy. And that counteracts nearly half of the disadvantage of a weekly over a daily, under a daily. So, and as I said, we have a lot of flexibility and certainly can make it work. In the cases where the timetable really demands a fast turnaround for a special meeting or something like that, something that can't be planned in advance, then I would submit, and other select boards have done that, in those, and in those cases where the frequency doesn't work, that it's not a Sunday or a Monday where it would work to get in the paper the next day in the Commons, in those cases, your copy can go to the Reformer. And several select boards have done this. I'm not sure about what your town attorney has offered you, but several select boards have specifically said either the Commons will be our newspaper of record, and in the circumstances where it doesn't work, we'll go to the other paper. Or they have formally said the Commons and the Reformer, and they'll choose. My point is, for most of your submissions, there will be the automatic cost savings with wider distribution, most of the routine submissions, in the unusual circumstances of needing a special meeting warned in 48 hours where the frequency doesn't work, but it does work there despite the 3-day lead time that they demand, things like that, then you could go there. Do the math. Most of the time, this select board and our Brattleboro budget will be helped by choosing the Commons over the Reformer. So for all of these reasons, for the ideals of supporting what we're trying to do in town, and for the nuts and bolts of the budgetary circumstances, we would feel privileged if we were to take on this for Brattleboro. I could answer any other questions. I could also talk if you'd like, and I shortened it because I know the hour's late and I don't want to belabor it, but I can also talk about the new developments in town and what that means to us with the Reformer. I urge you to maybe read our editorial that was in the paper this week. Page 2 talks about it all, whether there are still risks to remote ownership of our newspaper or not, that the Commons is here to counteract, things like that. But I won't go into it anymore. I'll just keep it on that and those nuts and bolts of how it can be beneficial to Brattleboro and for the Commons to be a newspaper of record, and we would love to work with you on it.
Thank you, Barry.
Anybody on the board have any comments or questions?
Well, I'll just say something quickly. I think the Commons is a really great newspaper, and I support you guys 100%. I just sort of have to, I don't know enough about it, so I'm sort of leaning on the town staff to tell me, but it's no reflection on what I think of the Commons, because I think you guys do a fabulous
Thank you, of course.
job.
And I'd like to say our recommendation isn't meant to indicate anything other than that as well. You know, we have respect for the team of people that make the Commons happen and for the quality of the product that you put out. Again, it's driven by our understanding that you have one newspaper of record and that it serves the public's needs better for that to be a daily than a weekly.
So it's a different kind of business, and it's also countywide, but the Waste Management District just made the Commons, and because they're in the newspaper Wilmington as well, another weekly, the Commons and the Valley News are the papers of record for us. And I guess what I'd like to do, since we're in a delaying mood tonight, is ask you to go back and look at the calendar. I guess Jan and anybody else that you talk to about it, and see how often do we need to know? Do we need that really immediate access? I mean, we've got a calendar in here every week that's goes on several weeks ahead, and just to see, is it necessary for us to spend as much as we do to do it with the Reformer if the Commons can do it as well with an occasional rare need for some emergency action? Kind of like to have you rethink it, given, based on, because I didn't know most of that stuff. And just think it over before we decide.
Dick?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a, for me, the Commons is a very good paper and a great addition to the community. I guess my concern is, special meetings that might crop up, that we need to have, press releases that we need to get out. Those are concerns that I would have. I don't know about what you speak, that we could make you the paper of record and then defer to the Reformer. The Reformer's going to be under new management in another week or two, maybe today.
As of today.
As of today. So some of the things that you speak of, I don't know, that's what the old management had in place, so I don't know if some of those things that you said are going to be in place going forward. So for me, the daily is where I am right now, but that's no reflection of what I don't think anybody on the board or anybody in town thinks of the paper.
Of course.
So you're kind of sometimes forced into a vote where it may not think that you're supporting one entity and you're picking another, and I don't think that's the case here.
Nor do I, thank you.
So,
I love the Commons, and I can say it, but I just don't, and forgive me, it's late, but I don't get the big deal. I'm sorry, I don't, is it just for a recognition thing, or is it just, it's just a legal thing for us, so I just don't know what it is for the Commons that would make it so appealing to have that. Is it just so that you can have it on a letterhead that we're the paper of record? Or?
It's not quite a letterhead, but it's just increasing our service and our communications with the community. It feels good to do this. It seems like this is our next step. That's why we've been reaching out to many select boards around the county, and most of them have been recognizing the difference between the papers and the trajectory of the papers, which maybe has changed now. I recognize that. They have agreed with us that this is the logical next step. Our commitment to the community, our nonprofitness, our ideals, and our product makes sense. There is an amount of income to it, like all of the ads that we produce. The ads keep the paper alive, as well as, to a smaller extent, our memberships and donations and things like that. This is in the purview of our ad department. So it's like looking for ads, but it's more than that. It's reflecting the respect due to our select boards and our communities, and the intercommunications. And we're a mission-driven, service-oriented organization. We would be servicing the community that much more. I hope that answers you.
No, it does. It does, right? Yeah.
So,
Well, if somebody wants to make a motion to continue this item to another meeting, we can consider that. Otherwise, we can have a motion to adopt the rules as presented. Whoever gets to it first. Jen?
Can I just speak to a couple of things? There aren't a lot of times in a year, in addressing Dave's point, how many times we really need to know, to have a publication that is not a weekly. But there are some, for example, DRB decisions or DRB notices. There are legal notices that have to be published X amount of days before the meeting. If that X amount of days does not fit in a weekly schedule, that throws a DRB decision off tremendously. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. We have increased on job placements, for example. We have included the comments more often. We have not gotten the feedback as much on a job placement ad as something that was placed in the Commons as we do in the Reformer, and all that goes along with it. It's not just publication anymore. It's digital. It's virtual. It's not just something in the newspaper. So I would, as much as I enjoy reading the Commons, I don't know myself, and I don't know that the public picks up a Commons to read a legal notice. And that's the people right now, the public right now is trained, that's sort of where they go. Not to say within a year, with all the transitions are happening, I think that may be something that we consider in a year. I would very much caution against making a particular newspaper a public record and then go to something else if that notice isn't going to work that week. I think we should pick one and stick with it.
John?
I would, just to expedite this, I would like to move this along and vote on it and go with staff recommendation.
Want to make a motion?
I will make a motion. To approve the 2016 rules for conduct of meetings, huh?
I'm sorry.
That's correct.
Yeah, you're right, right one, yeah.
And hearings.
Don't let her interrupt you.
I know, but she does.
I was telling him he was doing it right.
And hearings as presented.
We have a motion to adopt the proposed 2016 rules of conduct as presented, that include designation of the Reformer as newspaper record. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0.
Although we love the comments.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Everybody says we like the comments.
I know we do, I love the comments.
Equally as important.
Thank you.
I move to re-enter executive session to discuss labor relations agreements with employees. Was there anything else?
Contracts.
And contracts where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the municipality, select board, and people involved at a substantial disadvantage. Dick?
Do we have to make a motion to table F before we do this? Since we're not going to do our goals, we have to make a motion to table F.
All right.
Our next meeting.
David moves to table F, which is the goals meeting to the 2 weeks.
on the agenda?
2 weeks, May 17th.
Sure.
All right, we have a motion to table our goals discussion to May 17th. Is there any discussion?
Whose motion was that?
Dave's
Dick and Dave.
Okay,
The 3 Ds.
to May 17th.
May 17th. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. Then I move to enter executive session to discuss contracts and labor relations agreements with employees where the board has determined that general premature public knowledge would clearly place the town, the select board, and people involved at a substantial disadvantage, and I invite the town manager
And the
assistant town manager into the meeting.
Thank you.
They're already rolling credits.
Any discussion? It's like a movie. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That carries 5-0. We will be leaving executive session without taking any action. I want to thank members of the press. I want to thank BCTV operators. I want to thank Peter for running the tape recorder while I'm still talking. I want to thank ASL interpreters and say good night. Good night. Good night, James.
Ted Cruz.